Good morning. Hello. I'm back with another writing vlog, a little writing update. The last time you saw me, I just finished Clementine's sort of closure chapter for Magdalene, and I also finished up chapter 3 or 4, I can't remember which one, of the story that I decided is going to be named Delicate Vessels. I just thought we should do a little check-in first before we get into the writing of it all, and I'll go over my goals for this week. This week, I really want to focus on Magdalene because I only have like 2 chapters left to write for that draft, and I'm so close to the finish line for that. And I want to get that done and out of the way, and I want to send it off to some of my other writing friends to look over and then give me feedback on. So that'll be like the next portion of that story's, I guess, life cycle. I'm working on like my second version of a rough draft, I guess, and then I'm going to send it off to them, and then I'll work on their feedback, and then after that, I don't know, I haven't thought that far ahead yet. I just want to get the story done first. So that means Delicate Vessels will be put on a little bit of a back burner this week in terms of workload. I did, however, the other day, I was thinking about the next couple of chapters that I was going to write for that story, and I was thinking more about not Calliope and her relationship with her family, but about the other main character named James and sort of what his home life looks like, and I was fleshing that out a little bit more. So I am still sort of thinking about that in the back of my mind. I'm writing notes about things as they sort of come up to me, but it's not a priority right now. This week I want to get Charlie's sort of main closure chapter done and over with and written finally out of my brain and onto paper. And then after that, we will have sort of what I anticipate to be the final chapter where the two of them sort of loose ends get tied up between them and their relationship. And then that's like sort of the end of the book. I know I can definitely get Charlie's chapter done this week. I might be a little bold to say we could maybe get both chapters done this week. I don't know. We'll see what I have going on elsewhere in my life, if there's time or not. I've been snowed in a lot recently, so if we get any more snow, I might have extra time on my hands. We'll see. I actually started writing Charlie's chapter a little bit late last night, which I normally am not a late night writer. I feel like anything I do after like 8 o'clock is usually trashed the next day. But sometimes, bouts of inspiration strike and you just gotta move along with them. I wrote the beginning sort of couple introductory paragraphs of that chapter for Charlie, and they're good. I like them. It sort of takes you through like an extended metaphor that connect back to different points of his life and different points of the novel that bring him back to this moment that he's in now. And I think it's good. I like it where it is so far. We'll see if that changes at all as I continue on in the chapter. But there's basically like 2 main goals that he has to accomplish in this chapter, in these pages. He needs to reconcile with his brother Elliot, and he also needs to, I guess there's sort of 3 main goals, because he needs to reconcile with his brother Elliot, he needs to reconcile with Magdalene and her death, and sort of through those is a vehicle where he reconciles with himself, which is, I guess, his like ultimate character arc goal. I have some maybe kind of crazy out there ideas for how he's going to reconcile with Magdalene's death that I'm not going to tell you about, of course, because I don't want to spoil everything when it's not even fully written yet, but I'm excited about them. I'm excited to write those scenes. I think they're going to be fun to write. I think they're going to be really like jarring to read. I swear every time I sit in front of a microphone to speak, my body gets like so like stressed. I don't know why. And then like my mouth gets all watery and stuff. I think it's just because my brain is like always moving faster than I can like physically keep up with spouting out information. So I'm trying my best to like say everything that I have on my mind to say, like in a normal sort of pace and normal trajectory, but like my brain is like having 5 different conversations at once. It's very chaotic up there. What was I saying? Yeah, his closure with Magdalene scene, I'm excited to get into that. I have ideas. I've been writing ideas down and what they could mean for him and his character and the story. So that's exciting. His conversation with his brother, it's about his conversation with his brother, but it's also about they had a little bit of a, not necessarily a falling out, but just they had a new experience. They had something happen that between the two that had never sort of happened, and that kind of changes the landscape of their relationship for the time being, mostly on Charlie's end. And so when he's coming back to have this conversation with Elliot, it's about apologizing to Elliot and reconciling with him as his younger brother. It's also really important for Charlie too, because he in this moment has the power to do right by his brother and give him this apology in the way that his younger brother deserves, and in the way that Charlie wished that other people in his life were able to show up for him when he was Elliot's age. So that's really important for Charlie as well to choose to do that. And I think this conversation is going to be really emotional. I don't really have like a set in stone plan for how that conversation is going to go. I just sort of know the outcome of it. And I've been thinking a lot about setting, like where do I want this conversation to happen, because a lot of Charlie and Elliot's interactions in the book, I feel like they just all happen in like Charlie's bedroom, and I want like something different here, because I think like a different setting, a different change of scenery could maybe like signal also like they're entering a new phase in their relationship as siblings. So I've been going back and forth about where I want this conversation to take place. Right now I'm sort of thinking maybe in a car. I always like cars as a concept because their kind of main job, aside from like driving you somewhere, is like they're this liminal space between where you are and where you're going. Like that's what they are always. And I like that as an idea, maybe. Also like moving vehicles, like transition, change, moving forward. But I like the sort of liminal space of it all. I really like to zoom in on conversations and on moments when I write. I feel like in terms of timeline, I don't necessarily cover a ton of space, but I get a lot of depth out of the moments that are there. Like the whole book happens pretty much like across a span of like 3.5 months. So I like the idea of them having this really involved conversation in a car, sort of like reflecting that this is the moment that they're going from where they were as siblings to what they're going to become as siblings, if that makes sense. So that's my goal for this week. I also need to do my nails because they're growing out and they're chipping. Maybe you'll see footage of that later, I don't know. I also need to eat breakfast. But my goal for today specifically is to get a good chunk of that conversation dialogue out of the way. I tend to write like, if I don't have like a huge detailed idea of what a scene's going to be, I usually just start by writing the dialogue of the characters back and forth, like paragraph after paragraph. And then the scene kind of like takes shape out of that. So that's probably what I'm going to do today. Okay, let's do a little bit of a midweek check-in. I'm like 2/3 of the way through the chapter I'm working on. I finished Charlie's conversation with Elliot. It was partly a conversation, but I really felt like their reconciliation needed to be shown through actions instead of just dialogue. To me, that made it even more impactful and even more raw. And it was also important to me to include lots of affection between these two boys during this part because Charlie's character is impacted by a lot of emotional restriction and suppression, as you know, so many men are. But this was a moment where he could really have a chance to open up, even if it's imperfectly, and I think that matters more than anything else. So I'm happy with where that is at the moment. I also forgot that many months ago I had written a little blurb that I had intended to fit somewhere in this chapter when the time came for me to write it. So I've also looked over that and made a couple of changes so it fits better with where the story has ended up now. And so I'm ready to build around it and finally finish up this chapter. Before I get back into that though, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about today's sponsor. Just kidding, we're not there yet. I actually want to share some more of my writing process with you all. I'm someone who gets distracted kind of easily, and so I need to essentially block out the whole world in order to actually lock in and write more than like 5 words. So I don't go out to other places much to write. I usually prefer to sit at my desk with the curtains closed and my headphones in, and I'll listen to a variety of different songs during my time writing, sometimes with lyrics, sometimes just instrumentals. What I listen to really depends on what I plan on writing that day. I'll choose one album and just kind of have it repeated pretty much the entire time, and then the next time it'll be a different one. So for Magdalene, there's been like 5 or so albums I've been kind of cycling through. The album I went for most often while writing the story is probably Solange's When I Get Home. I love Solange. I don't know what it is about her music, but her voice and her instrumental choices are just so soothing and dreamy to me. She really gets me in the zone. If I want to listen to just an instrumental, I usually put on Swan Lake because Barbie's Swan Lake was one of my favorite movies as a child, so it's nostalgic to me. And because I'm so familiar with it, I'm able to have it on and to write without the orchestral nature sort of pulling me out of it every once in a while. I wrote a large chunk of this book over a prior summer, and most of the story also takes place during the summertime. And during that time, I recall repeating Without Warning, which is a collab album between 21 Savage, Offset, and Metro Boomin. I feel like that's so random. Like, how did I go from Tchaikovsky to that? I don't know, but it's a good album, and I just had it on a lot while I was writing some of the more summery scenes. Recently, as I've been working on these last few chapters, I've been putting on a lot of Twigs' Eusexual Afterglow. I think that's such a great album. I might actually prefer that more to the original. I just love her work so much. I've been listening to her for like over a decade now, I think. And also Ariana Grande's Eternal Sunshine. I just feel like there are some parallels between her writing and some of the stuff that my characters are going through, so it'll help me bring me back into their world a little bit. I actually, you know what, I thought of an idea just now. I want to make little playlists for each of my main characters with music that I feel like represents them and the journey they go through in the story, but I need some time to come up with those, so maybe I'll make a separate video on that sometime in the future if you're interested. But before I go, I will leave you with a quote from Charlie that I wrote this chapter that I like. He says, "I'm sorry for my father's mistakes and his father's mistakes and how they all mashed together to create me. I tried my best to make sense of it all, but I was a kid. That's not supposed to be an excuse, just real life." It's the weekend now. I made it through the week and I finally had some time to finish up the chapter that I was working on a couple days ago. I had to take a break from it for a few days because it's just getting a little heavy to write. I think I forget sometimes how emotionally taxing it can be to write. You have to put yourself in your character's place and bring yourself close to where they are mentally to write as accurately from their perspective as you can. And at least that's how it works for me. I'm very visual when I write, so I am imagining each piece of scenery and dialogue as it unfolds, sort of like a movie scene in my head. I do that to make sure that the story doesn't come across as awkward or stagnant on the page, but it can be a lot when you're working on an intimate and vulnerable part like most of this chapter is. I'll probably come back to it later on this month or next month and make a few tweaks, but I like where it is now. It's at a place where I feel good moving on to the next chapter, the final chapter, which my goal is to tackle in the next vlog. I told my writing friends to prepare themselves to read over my draft soon, and they're super excited. I'm super excited too. Only a few thousand more words to go. So yeah, I think that's where I'm gonna end things here. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!